5-foot or 6-foot rule concerning electrical disconnects pertains to the distance from the disconnect switch or circuit breaker to the point where the electrical conduit or cable enters the building structure. This requirement is primarily designed to provide a readily accessible means of disconnecting power to the building in case of an emergency, such as a fire or electrical fault. The specific distance, whether it's 5 feet or 6 feet, is determined by local electrical codes and regulations, which are often based on the National Electrical Code, or NEC. To accurately apply this rule, first identify the location of the main electrical disconnect. This is typically a switch or circuit breaker panel designed to cut off all power to the building. Next, trace the path of the electrical conduit or cable as it enters the building. The measurement should begin at a point where the conduit or cable physically penetrates the exterior wall, floor, or roof of the building. Using a measuring tape or wheel, measure the distance from the disconnect to this entry point. The measured distance should not exceed the limit specified by the local electrical code, whether it's 5 feet or 6 feet. There are several reasons why this distance requirement is crucial. Firstly, it allows emergency responders, such as firefighters, to quickly and safely energize the building's electrical system. This reduces the risk of electric shock and facilitates safe entry and operation during emergencies. Secondly, it provides a convenient means for maintenance personnel and electricians to disconnect power for repairs, upgrades, or inspections. Having a readily accessible disconnect close to the entry point ensures that work can be performed safely and efficiently. Thirdly, it minimizes the potential for damage to the electrical system in case of a fault. By quickly disconnecting power, the spread of a fault can be limited, preventing further damage to wiring, equipment, and the building itself. Now let's delve into the practical considerations when implementing this rule. One important aspect is to ensure that the disconnect is easily accessible and not obstructed by any objects or structures. It should be located in a clear and well-lit area where it can be quickly reached in an emergency. Additionally, the disconnect should be clearly labeled to indicate its purpose and the areas of the building it controls. The labeling should be durable and easily readable, even in poor lighting conditions. Another consideration is the type of electrical conduit or cable used. The material and construction of the conduit or cable should be appropriate for the environmental conditions and the type of electrical service. For example, underground conduit should be rated for direct burial and protected from corrosion. The conduit or cable should also be properly supported and secured to prevent damage or strain on the connections. When measuring the distance, it's important to follow the most direct path from the disconnect to the entry point. Avoid measuring along walls or around obstructions, as this will not accurately reflect the distance that an emergency responder would need to travel. If the conduit or cable runs through multiple walls or floors, the measurement should be taken from the point where it first enters the building envelope. In situations where the disconnect is located outside the building, such as on a utility pole or in a pad-mounted transformer, the distance is measured from the point where the service conductors enter the building to the first readily accessible disconnect inside the building. This disconnect must still be located within the specified distance, whether it's 5 feet or 6 feet. It's also important to note that the 5-foot or 6-foot rule may not apply in all situations. Some jurisdictions may have specific exceptions or modifications to this rule based on the type of building occupancy or electrical service. It's always best to consult with the local electrical inspector or authority having jurisdiction to ensure compliance with all applicable codes and regulations. Furthermore, the NEC provides additional guidance on the location and accessibility of disconnects in various types of installations. For example, Article 230.70a of the NEC states that the service disconnecting means shall be installed at a readily accessible location either outside of a building or structure or inside nearest the point of entrance of the service conductors. This requirement reinforces the importance of having a readily accessible disconnect for emergency situations. It is crucial to consider the potential impact of environmental factors on the electrical system and the disconnect. In areas prone to flooding, the disconnect should be located above the base flood elevation to prevent damage and ensure accessibility during flood event. Similarly, in areas with extreme temperatures, the disconnect should be rated for the appropriate temperature range to ensure reliable operation. The proper installation and maintenance of electrical disconnects are essential for ensuring the safety and reliability of the building's electrical system. Regular inspections should be conducted to verify that the disconnect is in good working condition and that all connections are tight and corrosion-free. Any signs of damage, such as cracks, rust, or loose wires, should be addressed promptly. It's also important to ensure that the disconnect is properly labeled and that all personnel who may need to operate it are familiar with its location and function. Training should be provided to emergency responders and maintenance personnel on the proper procedures for disconnecting power to the building. In addition to the 5-foot or 6-foot rule, there are other requirements related to the installation of electrical services and disconnects. These requirements are designed to ensure that the electrical system is installed in a safe and workmanlike manner and that it meets the needs of the building occupants. Some of these requirements include the proper sizing of conductors and overcurrent protection devices, the grounding and bonding of the electrical system, and the use of approved materials and equipment. The NEC provides detailed guidance on these requirements, and it's essential to consult with a qualified electrician or electrical engineer to ensure compliance. One common misconception is that the 5-foot or 6-foot rule applies to the length of the conduit or cable itself. This is not the case. The rule applies to the distance from the disconnect to the point where the conduit or cable enters the building, regardless of the length of the conduit or cable run. Another misconception is that the rule only applies to residential buildings. In fact, the rule applies to all types of buildings, including commercial, industrial, and institutional buildings. The specific requirements may vary depending on the type of building and occupancy, but the basic principle of having a readily accessible disconnect near the point of entry remains the same. To summarize, the 5-foot or 6-foot rule is a critical safety requirement that ensures a readily accessible means of disconnecting power to a building in case of an emergency. The rule applies to the distance from the disconnect to the point where the electrical conduit or cable enters the building. It's essential to consult with the local electrical inspector or authority having jurisdiction to ensure compliance with all applicable codes and regulations. Proper installation and maintenance of electrical disconnects are essential for ensuring the safety and reliability of the building's electrical system. Remember to always prioritize safety when working with electricity and to consult with qualified professionals when needed. Understanding the 5-foot or 6-foot rule is a fundamental aspect of electrical safety and code compliance. By adhering to this rule, you can help protect lives and property from the hazards of electricity. It's important to stay informed about the latest code changes and to seek clarification from qualified professionals when needed. Electrical codes and regulations are constantly evolving to reflect advancements in technology and to address emerging safety concerns. By staying up to date, you can ensure that your electrical installations are safe, reliable, and compliant. Finally, remember that electrical work should only be performed by qualified and licensed professionals. Electricity is a powerful force, and it can be dangerous if not handled properly. By entrusting electrical work to experienced professionals, you can minimize the risk of accidents and ensure that the work is done safely and correctly.